Good morning. Thank you all for coming today. Are you getting excited? I'm really excited. The weather is warm, nice breeze outside. If you've been out this morning, there's birds flying around us now. We're a little bit closer to the islands. You can see it on channel 32, so we must be getting closer. I'm very, very excited. All right, and everybody has their plans already made? Ready to go? Okay, good. Yeah, I know a lot of people had questions yesterday, so hopefully everybody's ready to go now. Well, today we're going to be talking about coral reefs. Anybody here a scuba diver or snorkeler? Of course, that's why you're here. Okay, good. I wanted to say, I don't know if she's here right now. Where's the lady that wanted to go diving? You? No. Okay. Well, there's a couple of people that want to go diving, and there is an opportunity to do so in Maui. So if you're interested in that, she said she'd come today. Let me know your cabin number, and I'll put you all together because they need a group of people and able to do it. And I said I'd make an announcement. So if you're interested in scuba, not for the first time, but scuba diving because you're already certified, let me know. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name's Nancy Caruso. I'm your naturalist and marine biologist on this voyage. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about is coral reefs. Tomorrow we have our last presentation on volcanoes, which is really exciting. So be sure to come in and listen all about volcanoes. I'll be telling you a lot about the park as well, Volcanoes National Park. And then after our trip to Hawaii, I'll have some presentations for you as well. Tonight, we're going to be doing our first stargazing. Hopefully it's clear. If it's too windy or if it's raining, of course it'll be canceled. But I'll be up on deck 9 to stop you from going up front if it's windy. And if it's canceled, I'll also be up there to let you know. But we'll start at 9 o'clock up on deck 9 forward. Bring your phones with your stargazing apps on them, and we will do some astronomy, pointing out stars. I know there's a cosmologist on board, so that should be exciting. It's Mary's husband, the Academy of Fun speaker, so he may come out there too and impart some wisdom on us. Now today, we have one last session of photography with Tom, so I wanted to alert you to that. If you've not gone to any of Tom's classes, he's already done 2 of them, and he's got 1 left. So I'll give him a chance to plug his class.
Good morning and aloha again. I love that. So if you do have an SLR camera or DSLR camera, and you're wondering how to finally get that off of auto, and you've ever been scared, I can help you do that today. I have this wonderful presentation. I'm definitely going to help bring things that are kind of hard to grasp back into simple and easy that you can understand and go, oh, that's how it works. So if you can and you want to learn, I know there's a lot of things going on today, but if you can make it out to the Firebird Lounge at noon right below us, I promise you'll learn a lot about your camera. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. We're going to start talking about coral reefs. Coral reefs are some of the most diverse ecosystems in the world, housing tens of thousands of marine species. But only 1% of the ocean seafloor is covered by coral reefs. We talk a lot about them because they're the closest things to us. Right? We don't spend a lot of time in the abyssal plain, which is the really deep parts of the ocean. We spend time along our coastlines on the continental shelf, and that's where we see the coral reefs. About 1/3 or 6,000 species of all marine fish live part of their lives on a coral reef. And coral reefs provide protection from storms. They're important to us too. We utilize the benefits of coral reefs. And over 1 billion people worldwide depend on coral reefs for their food source. So corals are very important for feeding 1 billion people. And luckily, they have value, about $3.4 billion every year, benefiting fisheries, tourism, and coastal communities. So that's very good when we put a price on something, because then it becomes valuable and worth protecting. As I said, the Mexican government just closed down the southern portion of their reef in Cozumel. That's a really big step to shut it down from tourism, from people visiting it. They generate a lot of money from that place, but they realized, hey, if this is dead, we're going to lose our value in the future. So that was a very bold move. I'm very happy for that. U.S. residents have value in coral reefs as well. The National Marine Fisheries Service estimates the commercial value of U.S. fisheries from coral reefs at over $100 million. Now, we don't have a lot of coral reefs in the United States. Where can you find them? Florida, yes. Where? No California, there's no coral there, too cold. Coral reefs in Texas, in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, reefs and coral reefs are different. Yes, we have reefs in California, you have reefs in Texas, but they're not corals. Okay, yeah. Okay, coral garden. I know there are some in the Gulf of Mexico as well. And then Puerto Rico, somebody said. Guam and Hawaii. Yes, of course. That's where we're headed to. Okay, coral reefs provide jobs. Local economies receive billions of dollars from visitors to reefs through diving tours, recreational fishing trips, hotels. People like to visit places that have beautiful coral reefs, just to look at them. Restaurants and other businesses based near reef ecosystems. And according to the University of Hawaii, the Hawaii Department of Natural Resources, Hawaii's nearshore reefs generate about $800 million in annual gross revenues. So it's very important to the state of Hawaii as well. And as I said, that's a really good thing, because when people's pockets get affected, then things are important. So, what is coral? Raise your hand if you think it's a plant. Raise your hand if you think it's an animal. Raise your hand if you think it's a mineral. Okay, there's a good mix of thoughts. Well, corals are actually animals. They are in the kingdom Animalia. But, very curious, they actually have algae living in them. Corals are animals that take advantage of both forms of nutrition by hosting plant-like algae in their tissues. And this algae is called zooxanthellae. Everybody say that. You're going to have to work that into a sentence today. That's your goal for the day. So, talk about zooxanthellae. The majority of corals' energy needs are provided by the zooxanthellae. So it lives in an environment in which it cannot actually feed itself well. So it has another organism that lives inside of it to help it live. If you went on the Alaska trip, this is like the lichens. It's a fungus that has an algae that lives inside of it. They're related to jellyfish, corals. They have tentacles, they have stinging cells like jellyfish. So let's take a closer look inside their tissues. This is a coral really close up, an individual polyp on the stony coral. And you can see those brown spots inside of it is actually that algae, that zooxanthellae that lives inside of its tissues. And they are photosynthesizing. What is the byproduct of photosynthesis? What does it produce? Sugar. It makes sugar, and it's energy for the plant. Well, it provides this for the coral as well. So the plant provides food for the coral, and in turn gets a place to live. Now, why do they have to do that? Let's think about something that we're familiar with. And you have all heard of Venus flytraps before, right? What do they eat? They eat flies. Why do they have to eat flies? What is protein made up of? Nitrogen. Nitrogen makes up the building blocks of life. It makes up proteins. Our bodies are just big blocks of nitrogen. So why do they need nitrogen? Well, if you're a gardener, you know the answer to that. Fertilizer is nitrogen. We put that in our tomatoes to make them grow. Well, Venus flytraps live in places where there is not a lot of nitrogen in the soil. So in order to survive, they've adapted to taking nitrogen out of the sky in the form of flies. Amazing adaptation to be able to do so. So it's a reverse, right? There's nitrogen in the form of food in the ocean. The corals have stinging tentacles. They can catch small zooplankton that's floating by with their tentacles. So they can get nitrogen pretty easily, but they can't get sugars. That's also really important for our bodies. So they get the zooxanthellae to produce sugars for them. And that's how they survive in this environment. Because believe it or not, coral reefs are not really nutrient-rich places. That's why the water is clear. If you remember when we left Vancouver, do you remember what color the water was up there? It was very green. If you were in Alaska, the water was very green. The reason? Because it's full of life. So much so, a drop of water would have hundreds of organisms in it if you looked under a microscope. The water in the tropics is crystal clear because there's nothing living in it. It's essentially, very oversimplified, it's dead water. Not a lot of nutrients in that water. So the organisms that live there have to work really hard at trying to make a living, trying to extract nutrients and food from this water. That's why the humpback whales don't eat in Hawaii. They lose 10,000 pounds on their journey to Hawaii and back again. There's nothing to eat. Not enough nutrients in the water for the food chain to feed a humpback whale. That's why there aren't whales that live in the tropics. They just go there to mate and give birth. And then they go back to their feeding grounds in cold waters, either in the Arctic or the Antarctic, where there's lots and lots of life. So here is a picture of coral, again, close up. If you were to zoom in on coral, this is what the surface is covered with. Small little jellyfish-looking polyps, all of them with tentacles, and all of them are individual, but work together as a community on one stony coral, or on one soft coral. These tentacles all have stinging cells on them called nematocysts. You ever been stung by a jellyfish before? Yeah, it's kind of painful. And you know what happens when a nematocyst fires off, either from a jellyfish or from a coral? If you've ever touched a sea anemone, you might have noticed as well, they're sticky. It's not sticky. They've fired harpoons from their bodies with backwards facing barbs on them into your skin, and they're trying to pull you into their mouth. Could you imagine this on a human scale? It would be terrifying. All right, but we can't see it, so it just feels sticky. Oh, that's sticky. No, he's launched a harpoon into your skin, and he's trying to eat you. That's what's going on. So these small little organisms, of course, are harpooned and pulled into the mouth of the corals or into the anemone or into the jellyfish. All of them are related. And they have stomachs. So here's the coral on the left. See all the individual polyps there that you can see. It makes it look furry. They have a mouth in the center of the tentacles, a stomach, a gastric system, and of course they poop, because everything poops. And the byproduct of their ingesting all of this food is creating a limestone skeleton to protect them. That's how the corals become limestone rocks. They actually excrete, like a clam excretes its shell around its body. They actually excrete calcium carbonate to create this limestone structure, which is the coral reef itself. When they retract their polyps inside, all you see is the rock. When they come out, usually at night, to feed, all these flowery polyps are up feeding, grabbing food, harpooning things as they're swimming by. So this is a coral that is dead. You might have heard a lot about bleaching corals, corals that have turned white. The reason they've turned white is because there has been some stress in the environment. Some stress such as warm water, cold water, pollutants, and the zooxanthellae die. Well, guess what? They can't live very long without sugars, just like you. So when the zooxanthellae die off, there is a lag time of a couple of days to a few weeks, depending on the coral species. And then their tissues turn white and they die. They can't live very long without that sugar. So it's a process of dying. And they can actually spring back if it's not too long. So if there's a heat wave, for instance, a big warm water current that comes through and stays there for a couple days, the zooxanthellae might die off, maybe only a few cells left. But if it should pass within the amount of time necessary to save that coral's life and the water temperature goes back to normal, those zooxanthellae can reproduce, get back up to the numbers that they were inside the cells of the coral, and that coral can come back to life, so to speak. So it's a very delicate organism, very sensitive organism, because it's relying on two different systems inside of its body. Coral reefs can be exposed. The South Pacific are the most diverse corals in the world, different from the Caribbean. The Caribbean is a very, very young sea, so it has not had a lot of time to evolve. The Pacific is where all the corals began, and they're very, very diverse. They can be exposed to sun like this at low tide. You don't have corals like this in the Atlantic Ocean. The Great Barrier Reef, of course, is the largest coral reef. It's the largest living structure on planet Earth. So large you can see it from space. And it's one community of organisms. One big, giant limestone reef created by polyps. Tiny little microscopic polyps created that whole reef together. The Coral Triangle, which is in Indonesia, it spans from the Philippines to Bali to Papua New Guinea, this area here, is known as the most diverse place on our planet. It's a very, very unknown place right here called Raja Ampat. I saw it on a TV program, Tom and I, about 8 years ago. I was walking through the living room, doing some ironing in the kitchen, and I saw something on TV that I'd never seen before, an underwater scene that had so much diversity. I stopped in my tracks because I knew that was something special. And I sat down in front of the television and watched and listened to this documentary about a place called Raja Ampat in Indonesia. It's a sovereign nation of islands. And it's the most biodiverse place, the cradle of the world's oceans. There are more than 2,000 fish species there and more than 600 species of coral. 600. Unparalleled. Unmatched on our planet. So I said, we are not going anywhere else until we go there. We'll save every penny we have. And it took 5 years, but we went. We had to fly from LAX to Hong Kong to Singapore to Bali, and then get on a plane to Flores, and then a plane to Maumere, and then on a ship to cross the Java Sea for 1,100 miles and get to the island nation of Raja Ampat. Wow. I will never see anything like that again. And now that people know about it, there's a lot of people going there. You know what happens when people go to coral reefs. So I'm so grateful that we had the chance to see it when it wasn't even new at that time, of course, but there's a lot more tourism going there now. Still hard to get to, but unbelievable. I'll be showing a little video about that, probably on the way back. So corals are extremely sensitive organisms. They need a water temperature between 73 and 84. This has been the problem lately, is our ocean temperatures are rising, and so coral reefs are dying because the zooxanthellae die off, and then they don't get any sugars, and the coral reefs die. No more living tissue. They need sunlight, of course, so they have to have crystal clear water with the perfect wavelengths of light. Salinity, 32 to 42 parts per thousand. Wave energy, they need waves. If there's no waves, they can't do it. And no pollutants, very sensitive. Anybody ever kept a coral reef aquarium? Yeah, it's difficult, right? I used to be the water chemist for an aquarium in Long Beach. So it was my job to check all the elements on the periodic table and make sure they were in perfect quantities for the coral reef tank. That was a really big deal because they need everything, every element on that periodic table is in the ocean. Every single one. And it has to be in the perfect amounts for corals to survive. Aquariums are pretty good at this. It's very difficult to grow corals. Lots of chemistry is involved, especially in really small tanks, because you got to balance that perfectly in order for everything to grow and have the perfect amount of light, the right temperature of light, the right wavelengths of light. It's really incredible. It's a great way to learn chemistry. Now, there's one thing about corals that people don't realize, because if you're not a diver, you don't see this. But this is not normal. There's no light like that underwater. Tom touched on this a little bit in his underwater photography class. But look at the background. If you were diving underwater, that's what you would see. If you had a big flash or some big giant lights to shine on this coral head, like the photographer did that took this picture, that's what you would see. Because underwater, if you remember your physics, When you go down beneath the surface of the ocean, you lose wavelengths of light. They're absorbed by the ocean. So this picture, you can look on the sides here, that was not lit up by the flash. That was not lit up by the flash. So this is what you would see, these gray colors, these brown colors. If you were just a scuba diver, you'd have to use a flashlight in perfect daylight to see all these gorgeous colors that actually exist on the animals that live under the sea. This is a great example. This is a picture taken probably about 60 feet below the surface, and that's what it looks like without light. That's what it looks like with light. And these organisms use that law of physics to their advantage. So there's a lot of fishes that are the color red. They know that we can't see them, and a lot of other organisms can't see them below 10 feet. You can't see the color red, so they look black. They hide under rocks, and nobody can even see them. They take advantage of this. So I'm going to do a little demonstration for you. Watch. This isn't going to change. This is the colors of the rainbow at the surface, and when we're going to descend with this slide down here to show you how the colors change at depth. So here's at 1 foot. Looks relatively similar, right? No changes because the light is not absorbed at 1 foot. Here's 5 feet. You see the reds are changing. That color or wavelength is being absorbed. You still see the greens, no problem. Still see the blues, no problem. The reds are starting to change. Just notice this one is beginning to get gray. Now it's gone, 69 feet. No more reds. And now you just see blues and greens. That's why the bottom of the ocean always looks so blue, because it's the only wavelength that makes it down that far. Let's talk about the types of coral reefs, because there's many different kinds. There's fringing reefs, barrier reefs, and atolls. And we're going to be going to the Hawaiian Islands, which have a very interesting and unique story of formation. So we'll be visiting fringing reefs on the Hawaiian Islands. This is Hanauma Bay right there. Great snorkeling spot. Fringing reefs grow near the coastline and around islands and continents. They're separated from the shore by narrow, shallow lagoons, and fringing reefs are the most common type of reef that we encounter. So here, around the big island of Hawaii, for instance, this is the shoreline, this red line around the edge of the island, and the fringing reefs would be this white area right around the island, very close to the island. Barrier reefs also parallel the coastline, but are separated by deeper and wider lagoons. At their shallowest point, they can reach the water's surface, forming a barrier to navigation. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest and most famous barrier reef in the world. The second largest is the Palancar Reef that goes along Cozumel. That's the second largest barrier reef. Now, if you've been to the Great Barrier Reef or even the reef of Cozumel, you have to travel to get to it in many parts. Tom and I went for 7 days off the coast of Australia out to the Great Barrier Reef. It took us 7 days to get out to the outer portions of it. So very big distance between the mainland and the reef. There's the Great Barrier Reef, and you can see how it's 1,500 miles long, spanning the tip of Australia, going up actually north of Australia and down through towards Hervey Bay. Atolls usually form when islands surrounded by fringing reefs sink into the sea or the sea level rises around them. These islands are often the tops of underwater volcanoes. And this is what we're seeing in the evolution of this in Hawaii. So, for instance, the Big Island. A volcano erupts, creates an island in the middle of nowhere from nothing, right? From the mantle of the earth. 2.5 million years later, the island, after it's been there for a while, it's cooled, starts to erode, right? As soon as the waves and the wind start hitting it, it's eroding away off the surface. But the corals have started taking hold along the outer edges of that new island, where the sunlight is able to let them grow, for their zooxanthellae to get photosynthesis. 5 to 10 million years, the island is continuing to sink. You have just the coral now that's created its own island, a ring around that original volcano. It's persisting because it's constantly growing, right? It also gets eroded, but it's constantly reproducing and creating more limestone. And then finally, that island submerges because of so much erosion, 10 to 30 million years in the process. And that central lagoon is what's left, a hole in the middle of the coral reef. Now, this is really fascinating. I'll be talking about more of this tomorrow on why the coral reefs have disappeared on the old Hawaiian islands that formed 65 million years ago. So the fringing reefs continue to grow and eventually form circles with lagoons on the inside. We see this in Bora Bora when our ship goes through the South Pacific. Those islands are almost completely eroded away, and all you have left is the ring of coral reef around them because those volcanoes are so old. And these make beautiful photos. Patch reefs are small, isolated reefs that grow up from the open bottom of the island and platform or continental shelf. They usually occur between fringing reefs and barrier reefs, and they vary greatly in size, but rarely reach the surface of the water. So this is found in the lagoons between the barrier reefs and the islands. You won't see these in Hawaii. The islands aren't old enough. But in the South Pacific and the older volcanic islands like Tahiti and Moorea and Bora Bora, this is evident there. Notice that beautiful blue line. This is what has to be done, like in the Florida Keys when you have these patch reefs along the coast, in order for boats to get through. They got to dredge the whole thing out. Then we have wrecks. This has become, I can't imagine. Could you imagine the sailors of 400 years ago offering to sink their ships for coral reefs to grow? They said, no way, that's for the doomed, right? The sailors' ships that sunk became coral reefs. But now we sink them on purpose to create habitats for corals and divers. Really, it's for recreation, for divers to be able to go, for tourism. And very quickly, when a wreck is sunk, in the United States, you go through lots and lots of permitting, years of licensing and permitting to be able to sink something under the water. But right away, life begins to grow. Within a week, you'll have life growing on something leaving the ocean. So I usually can tell how long something's been lost underwater by how many different organisms are growing on it. In California, we have oil rigs. And I know they're in the Gulf of Mexico as well. Well, we have them sitting in 3,000 feet of water, just 6 miles off our coast. And a lot of them are becoming decommissioned. And so they thought, well, what are we going to do with them? Do we take the whole thing out? Well, there's beautiful reefs now growing on them. And so if we remove all that, we remove all that life. So it was a huge debate, controversy, and finally decided that they were going to remove it 80 feet below the surface, leave the other 2,000 feet down there so that all that life can continue to thrive. There's actually dive boats that go out to the oil rigs and let divers dive on them because there's so much life out there. There's a new thing now, art installations in the ocean. I'm not a big fan, but this is kind of in the place of sinking a ship. Artists will put installations in. This is concrete and leave them there. And of course, life will grow all over this and it'll become a reef itself, which that is, I understand, but sometimes they just put them in temporarily and then remove them, like an art exhibit at a museum. That I don't understand at all because there's plenty of beauty already under the water. But pay attention to this. It's happening all over the country. And you have a say in it if you like it or not. This one I really don't get. That's ridiculous to me. It's silly. So let's talk about threats to coral reefs. One, of course, is us. Pretty much 1 through 10 is us. Most people don't realize, that's why I asked, do you think it's a rock? Do you think it's a plant or an animal? Most people don't realize how delicate corals are and that they are alive. They're not rocks. They have this very delicate tissue that covers the rock. And you need only swipe it with the tip of your finger and you've killed it. swipe it with the tip of your finger and you've killed it. You've wiped off the tissue, the living organism. So stepping on it is incredibly detrimental to the coral, of course, but yet you see it all over the place. That's why they make you watch the movie at Hanauma Bay. You must go in and watch a 7-minute film about not doing that so they can protect their reef. So tourism is probably the biggest detriment to coral reefs that are within tourism's reach. This is a little graphic of all the different things that can affect them. Of course, fishing, pollution spills, storms, warming oceans, dredging, agriculture, even sunbathing. So I mentioned this before. Silting is another thing that can cause damage to coral reefs. So in areas where they're doing construction, for instance, and there's a lot of rain, those areas in the United States have to be cordoned off so that it collects all the runoff that comes off those construction sites, because that just creates this in the ocean, muddy waters. And silting blocks out the sunlight for those zooxanthellae. They can't get sun, they die. Then the coral ends up dying as well. As I mentioned, if you see the water looking like chocolatey yoo-hoo, please don't go swimming in it. The myriad of things that are in that water is sometimes not recoverable for your health. So remember, the cow farms are at the top of the island. So when it rains, yeah, all that comes down. So don't swim in the water when it looks like yoo-hoo. And it's very common because it rains a lot on some portions of these islands. Just don't go in the water. Not a good idea. Plus, everything runs into the ocean. There's no sewage treatment for the rainwater that runs off the islands, nor is there in most places in the United States. So as I said, even in California, we don't swim in the water until 3 days after a rainstorm, ever. I know a lot of people with flesh-eating bacteria, surfers that have had treatments for their whole lives to recover from doing things like that. Okay, bleaching. On the left, we have a healthy coral reef. On the right, we have dead zooxanthellae. Right? The zooxanthellae died off because of some stressor. The living tissue then had no sugars, and it died as well. This is the problem that we're being faced with at the moment with warming temperatures. But just recently, in the last 10 years, we've also found out, lo and behold, we've been contributing with our sunscreens. And I don't know why we didn't think of this before. Everybody lathers on chemicals and then goes and gets in the ocean. That makes so much sense. There's millions of us in the ocean every day, washing all this stuff off into the water. And the FDA and the USDA never tested it on corals. It's okay for our skin, apparently. But we figured that out, that it kills larval corals. And so now, not the big companies yet, but some of the small companies, boutique companies, are making coral-safe sunscreens. Coppertone and all those Banana Boat, all those companies aren't doing it yet, which is unfortunate. But Australia's Gold, which we sell in our gift store, thank you, Carnival, because we take millions of people to coral reefs every year. Carnival is providing coral-safe sunscreens in our gift shop. So please, in Hawaii, it's against the law to wear regular sunscreens now. Yeah, you can get ticketed for wearing regular sunscreens because they're losing their corals right now. And they're going to do everything they can to save that $3.4 million economy. So this is a message from Maui. You may find that when you go to the beach, there'll be people standing there asking you, can I see your sunscreen? And maybe exchange it for you. Sometimes they'll have an exchange program where they'll give you a coral-safe sunscreen, or they'll say, please don't wear that. You can deposit it here, or please don't put it on, because they really want to help their coral reefs. This is something that they, like I said, they just figured it out about 10 years ago, and it's slow getting messages out to people. So some of the problem chemicals are these. And unfortunately, all your Coppertone and sunscreens that are sold in drugstores contain oxybenzone is one of the big ones, and octinoxate is the other one. And that kills larval corals when they're reproducing. So there you go. There's one thing you can do to help. Now, we certainly don't dynamite anything, but when Tom and I were in Indonesia traveling across the Java Sea, we found a reef that had been dynamited. And we jumped in the water and everything was just blown up. All the corals were alive because they'd just been dynamited within a couple of days, but they were all destroyed, ripped up. And all the fish were kind of swimming sideways from the percussion waves of this dynamite. Obviously, if it was near it, they would have died, but their inner ears were all messed up. So in some places in the world where 1 billion people rely on eating food from coral reefs, it's a whole lot easier to throw a stick of dynamite in, and you just pick up all the fish. You don't have to go catch them all individually. So this is something that actually is happening. Cyanide is another one. And I only mention this because if you keep a fish tank at home, where'd that fish come from? Most people don't think about that. But this is one of the ways that reef fish are caught. You squirt cyanide into a coral head, all the fish come out because they can't stand the poison, but all the coral's dead now. They scoop up the fish because they're kind of dazed, and then they go sell them to you at your fish store for $35. So ask how your fish are collected. If you do keep fish at home, you'll be happy to know that Petco and PetSmart only sell aquacultured fish. They only sell fish that are raised on fish farms now, which I highly applaud. As I said, I studied marine biology and aquaculture in college. I really believe in aquaculture and helping to turn things around now for us. And so I'm really happy to share that with you. So we know better. Now we have to do better. Once you know something, you've got to change your behavior if you want to fix it. That's all up to us now. So what are we doing? Coral restoration. I do ocean restoration work, right? I'm restoring abalone, kelp, white sea bass, clams in the ocean. And a lot of work is being done in the Keys and around the world to figure out how to grow corals. It's one thing to grow them, it's another to put them in the ocean and tell them to grow right there. As I know, as a restoration specialist, you can put something somewhere in the ocean, and there are so many variables involved with it being successful at living right there. We don't even know the half of it. So there's a lot of research going on to try to figure out how to grow corals and how to put them in the right places to restore them. Most of the corals you buy in your stores now, thankfully, in pet stores, are all aquacultured. This is a little side hustle for most people. I have students in high schools that I'm telling them about doing this, and they're starting up coral tanks in their bedrooms and selling little fragments of corals for $50 or $60 a piece. Some of it's really easy to do. So aquaculture is helping the coral reefs. And of course, learning how to raise the fishes and the shrimps and the snails and everything else that lives on the coral reefs as well is also in progress, just in time for Finding Nemo. Can you imagine? Finding Nemo came out. What did all of your kids and grandkids want to have for Christmas? A Nemo. They all wanted Nemo. Well, could you imagine the devastation to the coral reefs around the world when everybody was taking Nemos? Luckily, aquaculture was on top of that, and they figured out how to grow Nemos before Finding Nemo came out. Several years before Finding Nemo came out. About 1979, the first aquaculture clownfish were farmed. Just one species, though, not the Nemo species. So they figured out this species by the time the film had come out. It's very difficult to close the life cycle of a marine fish. Think about all the variables in the ocean. When a clownfish is born, we know they lay their eggs in sea anemones because we've all seen Finding Nemo. When a clownfish is born, it's microscopic. It gets swept away by the currents and it becomes plankton for weeks and weeks on end. And then something we don't even know in the ocean gives it a cue to settle down to the bottom in an anemone. Find an anemone as in a microscopic clownfish floating around through the world's oceans. How do you do that? We have no idea. Think about all the clams, mussels, shrimp, oysters, lobsters, halibut, bass that you eat. They start off their lives microscopically. Every drop of water has life in it. You could get hit in the face with a wave at the beach. You just ate all those things. It's in your ears and your hair. It's covering your body. All those animals start their lives off microscopically. Most of the life in the ocean is microscopic. And most of the things we eat begin microscopically. We have no idea how they do it. Moon, tides, temperatures, currents, salinity, all hundreds of variables. So figuring out how to grow an organism in the ocean is very difficult. So they've got the percolas down, the clownfish, and by the time Finding Dory came out, there was actually grants being issued to hobbyists to figure out, people who do it for fun, because they're the ones that really are doing all the groundbreaking aquaculture right now. There's no money from the government. So some hobbyists in Florida figured out how to grow dories just in time for Finding Dory. Thank God. So we didn't have to take all those out of the ocean. These 3 guys down in Florida, there was a big team of people put together, kind of like the Apollo mission. They said, we have to get together to figure out how to grow this fish so we don't have to deplete it from the world's oceans. And they did it. They figured it out. So what can I do? Well, if you do keep tanks, fish tanks, make sure they're from aquacultured farms and buy them from the US. We do it here. If you're going into the ocean, make sure your sunscreen is ocean safe. It won't have those ingredients on it. It'll be called mineral sunscreen. It's a little pastier. Or guess what? Tom and I just wear wetsuits. Skins. Yeah, 1 millimeter suit. I wear a hat. When I get in the ocean, I wear a little beanie. Keeps my body covered. I don't get sunburn. Don't stand on the corals, for heaven's sakes. And then the United States, listen to this statistic, imports 80% of the seafood we eat. 80%. So where does your seafood come from? How is it caught? Is it caught by enslaved fishermen in Indonesia that are dynamiting the reefs? Do you know? I do, because I ask where my fish comes from. That's why I don't eat fish on the ship, because they can't tell me where it comes from. Most of it, basa is Chinese catfish. Swai is Chinese catfish. Most of it I don't eat because I don't know where it came from. I only eat United States seafood, either raised by a United States farmer or taken from United States waters, because I know where that is. So, buy U.S. seafood. And it also contributes billions to our trade deficit. So there you go, if you're an economist. What do you put on your lawn? And do you do it right before a rainstorm? Because that's all going into the rivers and into the ocean. As you saw from Finding Dory, everything leads to the ocean. And Finding Nemo. And then support reef-friendly businesses. Support businesses that are doing something to help. And there are a lot of them now. A girl that I mentored when she was in high school just graduated with a master's degree in social entrepreneurism. What the heck does that mean? It's a new thing. Businesses want to have a social conscience now. They're all doing something to help somebody else or something else. So support those businesses that support what you want your money to go to. Let's talk about Hawaiian corals. Well, number one, they're unlike any other corals in the world. They probably came from the currents off of the Philippines. When the Hawaiian Islands were formed, the currents come down through there, and the larvae from the corals in the Philippines probably came through and landed on the Hawaiian Islands, where they found a suitable habitat to grow. But they're nothing like the Philippines corals, so they've evolved over the years to live in that area and nowhere else in the world. The majority of the nation's coral reefs are found around the northwest Hawaiian Islands, 410,000 acres of living reef in the main islands alone, more than the landmass of Oahu. 7,000 known species of marine plants and animals with 1,250 endemic species. That means found nowhere else in the world. More than 500 species of marine algae have been identified in Hawaii, and 25% of the reef fish in Hawaii are found nowhere else in the world. So they make these colonies that create this limestone structure on the coral reefs in Hawaii. We have lobe corals. Now, most of the corals in Hawaii are not colorful. They don't have soft corals like they do in the South Pacific. You don't have soft corals in the Atlantic either because the ocean is too young. The Hawaiian coral reefs are really young. right? They're only 300,000 years old around the Big Island. So they're very drab in color. They're yellows and tans and grays and browns, a few colors of purple and pink. This projector doesn't give us good colors, I'm sorry. But this is a yellowish tan cauliflower coral with a hawkfish in it, an antler coral, kind of a yellow-brown. The lace coral's kind of a yellow-brown. Finger corals, again, kind of a gray in color. And then this rice coral. Of course, without light on it, it would also look brown, but it is a really bright pink color. Sandpaper rice coral, kind of a bright yellow color. And they have the soft corals, not the soft corals of the South Pacific, but these are more like orgonians or fans. The black corals, as you may have heard the shopping expert talking about. Black corals live at a depth of 75 feet to 400 feet. They grow very, very deep. They don't need light because they don't have the zooxanthellae. They have a very soft tissue on the outside, and they look wiry like this, kind of like grass. Their tissue is red on the outside, and they don't have a limestone skeleton. It's very rare in the world. The Caribbean has killed all of their black coral, so they actually import it from other places. But Hawaii still has some, and it's regulated very, very heavily. I think there's only 50 permits that are allowed, and the amount that you collect is very regulated. But there's great stories about the deep sea black coral divers. If you're a diver, you'd find it very interesting because these guys regularly dive to 200 feet on steel 72s, deep depths. And there's a great documentary called Black Coral Divers. There's this excellent shop in Maui, in Lahaina, on the end of the road that sells fossils and black coral, fossilized black coral, as well as other oddities. And it's owned by a gentleman who was a black coral diver and has lots and lots of diving history from Hawaii. And I happened to meet him a long time ago, about 10, 12 years ago. Every time I go to Maui, I go in there and talk, and I find that he hires people that also have similar experience as him. So the last time I was in there, I met a couple that were deep sea divers, and they told me about this documentary. Fascinating stuff. If you go to the Black Coral, Maui Divers, they were the original company that made jewelry of black coral. They have a video that they'll make you watch to go through their jewelry store, and it's fascinating. So pay attention. Really interesting stuff. Gorgonians are related to the black corals, not corals at all, but organisms, that also known as sea fans, have little polyps on them, just like the corals do. Sponges, also alive. Sponges are made of silica, same thing your computer chips are made out of. Fascinating. And there's shrimps and crabs that live in the sponges and nowhere else in the world. They have to find that sponge when they're born and they're plankton and floating around the ocean. They only live in that species. How does that happen? I don't know. We don't know these things. That's why we can't grow them. How do you see corals? Well, scuba is my favorite way to do it. But you can also snuba if you're not brave enough to get a certification to become a scuba diver. They put this plug in your mouth, and you can only go down 12 feet or so, and you can't kill yourself really easily at 12 feet. So you try it out, see if you like it. Breathing underwater is awesome, but it's not for everybody. Snorkeling is another option. You don't have to leave the comfort of the surface, and you can even stay in water you can stand up in. So if you get freaked out, you just stand up on the sand. There's a great place to snorkel in Molokini Crater. And you can also see corals from the air. Because of the fringing reefs that go around the islands, you can see the corals from the air, see the immensity of their size. You can go to aquariums to see corals. They raise them there, and you can talk about it. You can't talk underwater. Well, Tom and I know sign language, so we can talk underwater. But most people can't talk underwater. The submarine is another option, and the glass-bottom boat. You don't even have to get wet. So you can see them even if you're not a swimmer, no problem. Now, if you do go out on any of these types of excursions, they'll be giving you a little card. You can identify the different species that you may see on the coral reefs. So we're going to talk about some of them. And I'm going to make you pronounce the name of this fish. So all the fishes, of course, have Hawaiian names because they named them before we got there. Here we go. Ready? Lau, willy, willy, nuku, nuku, oi, oi. Lau, willy, willy, nuku, nuku, oi, oi. It's almost as long as long-nosed butterfly fish. There's about 500 species of butterfly fishes, of shallow water fishes that we're going to be we are talking about. This is an endemic species of butterfly. It's only found in the Hawaiian Islands and nowhere else in the world. Here's some other butterfly fishes, usually yellow and black and white in color, but varying in patterns. Damselfishes. These are probably my favorite fish because they have such attitudes. They occur in all the world's oceans. We have our state marine fish in California is a damselfish. He's all orange. But they're tiny things, some of them, maybe only 2 inches in length, but they have the attitude of a Bigfoot. If you go near one of their nests, they will attack you. A 2-inch fish will attack you. And often you have to understand there's a whole civilization going on under the ocean. You're just a visitor. So if you're going snorkeling, let me give you a piece of advice. Stop flailing. Just lay still. Breathe, lay flat, and don't move. Don't move. Because there's 72 different species most likely underneath of you, and they're all doing their daily jobs. If you don't know what you're looking at, you swam over all of it already. Don't move. Just lay still and watch what's going on around you. If you happen to see one of these guys come up and start pecking at your mask or biting your fingers, that means you're sitting on top of his nest. They make little nests and depressions in the sand or on rocks on an angle of about 35 degrees. And the males tend to their nests, and they will defend it to their death. If you happen to come close, they'll try to kill you. They can't, but they will try mightily. This Hawaiian damselfish called a dacilus lives in the antler coral. That's where they live. If you get close, they all will go down into the antler coral, disappear. Sit there and watch them. Stop moving. Everybody wants to get somewhere when they're snorkeling. Just sit still and watch the life around you. There's a whole civilization under there. Parrotfish, responsible for our beaches. If you've ever laid on a white sand beach, it's because of this guy. His poo is your white sand beach. Yeah. When he goes to sleep, he encompasses himself in a big mucus bag under a rock that doesn't taste very good. I don't know if you knew this, but all the fish during the day go to sleep at night. There's a changeover in the watch. From day, twilight, all the fish go under the reefs or wherever they sleep, and the nighttime fish come out. That's why diving at night is so spectacular. Totally different reef at night. The parrotfish eats algae that grows on corals. See all the marks there from him biting it? Well, he also gets limestone in his belly, calcium carbonate. He doesn't want that. So what does he do? He poops it out. One single bumphead parrotfish can chew through 5 tons of coral a year, but they give back 200 pounds of sand a year. That's your white sand beach. Eels. They always look mean because they breathe through their mouth. Same with sharks. Their mouths are always open because they're bringing in water across their gills and it's coming out of their operculums. You've seen this movie, right? That's where it came from, moray eels. That is exactly what a moray eel has. It has a pharyngeal jaw, a double jaw that comes out from its mouth to grab its prey. You thought they made that up. Trumpet fishes, stealth predators, and wrasses. Oh, the wrasses. There's wrasses in every ocean on the planet, and they all have a job. Cleaner wrasses. It's their job to clean all the other fishes in the ocean. So if you sit still, you'll see the fish lined up, literally in a line, waiting to be cleaned by the cleaner wrasses. The cleaner wrasses have a promontory, a reef top, where the fishes sit. They do some sort of behavior like turn upside down or turn color to let the fish know it's okay, that you can clean me now. And the cleaner wrasse will go in its mouth, clean in its gills, and then the next one moves in. If you sit still, you'll see this. Reef triggerfish. This is the state fish of Hawaii. You'll see it all over the place. Lots of different organisms: boxfish, frogfish, tunas, starfish, octopus, coral-banded shrimp, slate urchins, nudibranchs, and the hairy triton, endemic to Hawaii. Then we have the creepy crawlies, the things with lots of legs, the things with skeletons of cartilage, the honu, the turtles, very important in Hawaiian culture. Green sea turtles and hawksbilled sea turtles. I have to hurry because there's something coming on after me. Marine mammals, the spinner dolphins, the bottlenose dolphins, of course, the humpback whales from December to March. And the most critically endangered marine mammal on Earth, the monk seal. If you should see one, please note that it is against federal law to approach a monk seal closer than 150 feet. You'll be ticketed and cited on the spot, because people are known to call and report you. And they do come up on the beaches, so be aware and please do not approach them. Number one, they can bite your face off, and two, it's illegal. So go for it. Take the plunge. Go see the corals in Hawaii. Whether you get wet or you stay on the boat and look through the glass, they're gorgeous. Check it out. Life is better, downward wetter under the sea. Mahalo, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Have a great afternoon.